Our next speaker is Dr. Jayaraman Mahadevan. After completing his PhD in 2010 from the University of Madras, Dr. Jayaraman Mahadevan served as the Director of Research Department at Krishna Macharya Yoga Mandiram, Chennai for a decade. He is currently the Director of the Textual Research Division at Indica Yoga. He has published 17 peer-reviewed research papers and 15 books. In 2021, he received the Karnataka Samskrita University's Book Award for his work Mantra Artha in Sanskrit. Dr. Jayaraman Mahadevan will now speak on Think Global and Act Local in the field of yoga. Dr. Jayaraman will now also launch his book, Hatha Yoga Pradipika, a Tamil translation of this 15th century work. This new translation is appearing after 126 years. He will speak on Think Global and Act Local in the field of yoga.
Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Namaste to one and all. At the outset, I would like to thank Pondi Litfest for this opportunity to share my thoughts, and also my organization, Indica, which is also a session partner. As was told in the introduction, I focus on textual aspects of yoga. The Think Global, Act Local in the context of yoga, I will speak in the light of the work that I have done, in the light of the new Tamil translation of Hatha Yoga Pradipika. I'll just Initially, I will quickly give the background as to why I took up this new translation of Hatha Yoga Pradipika, the context I will set, and then the book launch will be there. So, the global dimension of yoga is known to everyone. All right. The global dimension or the global reach of yoga, especially in the last 8 years, is known to everyone. The overwhelming support in the UN, etc., is known. 190 plus countries, they celebrated yoga this time officially. And yoga has also now become a lucrative career. It's among the top 100 career options. All those things are there both in India and abroad. And even in the COVID times, it is one of the systems which have adopted really well, adapted itself very well. Online, it flourished. So being in the field of yoga, I could see that. So the global universal reach of yoga is not means known to everyone. But at the local level, what's happening is there is a lot of scope of doing a lot of things at the local level, especially in our country. See, only when we strengthen the roots can the global shoots of yoga be strong, or else there will be a reverse teaching or something like that. It's already happening. So to stem the rut, we have to do something at the local level at many dimensions in yoga. One is using of local materials. For yoga, again, yoga has now many paraphernalia, be it the yoga mat, yoga blocks, and many props, etc. are there. So we are moving to synthetic yoga mats, etc. In that place, again, indigenous materials, darbha grass, etc. can be used. So that is one dimension of local aspects or acting local in the context of yoga. And then, of course, the geography, many geographical units that's there in our country, we have yet to identify, claim, own it up. So either it's Mysore in the south or Haridwar in the north when we speak about yoga. There are so many places in our country. In the last week, I visited Kurukshetra. There is no yoga connect at all. Whereas Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Dhyana Yoga, Raja Yoga, everything took birth in the form of Bhagavad Gita in Kurukshetra. Yoga field has not yet owned up that locale. So in that dimension also, in the geography dimension also, we can act local. And of course, it will have its own ripple effect in the global scene. And this is a lit fest. So the language dimension. So how have we strengthened the local languages and the imparting of yoga in the local languages? So that is very important. When we see again for the past decade and a half, I'm in the field of yoga teaching, doing textual work, etc. Most of the things as I see happening in only English, whereas the language of yoga is Tamil, the language of yoga is Sanskritam. The teaching medium is English, and then how much of literature based on Sanskrita, based on the original Tamil has been produced and disseminated in the regional languages including Tamil, Telugu, Malayalam, etc. How much have been created and how much has been used in the classrooms? So that's a big question. So again, everything we have to learn through as D.V. Sridharanji said, so even in yoga, we should not become a brown kind of Englishman just like that. So we should not learn yoga through English, whereas the sources are in Tamil and Sanskrita, basically. So this is the background, especially the linguistic or literary background, which impelled me to look into yoga literature in Tamil or to translate material more and more into the regional languages. My mother tongue is Tamil, so I thought I should make, as Sridharanji said, that the big flywheel is there. I can try to make a small push. So that's my humble view also. So can we make available more and more material? So in many universities, as I have observed, that due to lack of material, good material in Tamil, they are not including good material in the syllabus. In Yoga Sutra, certain universities don't have Yoga Sutra, yoga for yoga syllabus. They don't have Yoga Sutra because there is no material, especially in Tamil. I'm speaking about university in Tamil Nadu. So at least if we address that dimension, that literary local translations, good translations can be made available, an attempt can be made, then the local roots can be strengthened for yoga, which will have its own effect. So in that dimension, and of course, the advantages of learning yoga in the local language rather than in English, etc. is known to everyone. The NEP focuses a lot on learning in mother tongue, and especially in a practical discipline like yoga, where understanding should be more. So making material available in Tamil, etc. will be helping understanding and imbibing the principles better. And then it's not that the entire country is fully educated in English, or it's not necessary at all. So for that audience, which is wide, which needs the regional language inputs, so translations into Tamil is needed for various yoga texts, especially I'm speaking in the context of Tamil. And finally, and more importantly, from a civilizational perspective, many English translations. So even now, people look for Western authors' English translations. So if the imparting is happening in English, and naturally the more glamorous, the more kind of attractive names are the Western authors, and they come with their own civilizational orientation, moorings, background, etc. So there we read more on English material, such material, then there is a possibility that we lose that orientation or the original paramparika jnana that is there in yoga, and we are left imbibing what the Westerners want to understand. So, but fortunately or unfortunately, a lot of linguistic or literary space is available in local languages like Tamil, where authentic, original texts have not been translated. For example, for Yoga Sutra, there are many Tamil Yoga Sutra translations directly, but the primary commentary to Yoga Sutra is Vyasa's commentary, which is considered very close to Patanjali Maharshi. That is not translated at all into Tamil. So we have that space, and I tried to use it up when I was working in Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandiram, and then translated the Vyasa Bhashya into Tamil. so that the primary interpretation to Yoga Sutra is made available in Tamil. And if anyone want to look into the primary commentary in Tamil, so they have this option. So rather than to go into the Westerners' interpretation. And the current book is the next step in that dimension. This is the book which is to be released in this session now, Hatha Yoga Pradipika. In yoga, just like the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, the Hatha Yoga is a very powerful, very strong and very adored, practiced tradition. And there are so many texts prior to and after Hatha Yoga Pradipika, but Hatha Yoga Pradipika is the central text even now, prescribed across universities and various yoga institutes. They teach that. And this text has not been recently translated. In 1896, Ve Kuppuswami Raju, Tanjai, from Tanjavur, he translated it. And it saw one more edition, that's all. But for the current times, if many people are getting into the practice of yoga in the contemporary Tamil, we don't have this Hatha Yoga Pradipika. It has 15 asanas, 8 pranayama practices, 10 mudras, Nada Anusandhana and other samadhi practices which are very critical, very central. Not only that, apart from these numbers of practices, it also defines what Hatha Yoga is, what kind of food, what kind of lifestyle, what is an appropriate place for the practice of yoga, how the kingdom or the country should be, which is appropriate for the practice of yoga. Surajye dharmike deshe subhikshe nirupadrave. So the Rajya should be Surajya, it should be Dharmika, and it should be Subhiksha, and then Nirupadrava, without any kind of social evils. So all such wonderful, comprehensive idea about Hatha practices are described in this text. Unfortunately, we did not have a contemporary or current time translation for the consumption or for students to read. So that in that dimension, so this work was taken up. So you can see the source text is has been given in simple transliteration, Tamil transliteration. Word split is given, and then the Tamil translation in current day Tamil is given, and then inputs from the traditional Jyotsna commentary is given. This is the structure which has been followed. So whatever has been given in the tradition has been presented as such. So one can read it and then grasp it, and based on that, one can develop one's own understanding in whichever tradition of yoga, be it Shivananda, Krishnamacharya, whichever tradition of yoga, one can relate with it. So as they say in certain books, as it is. So this is Hatha Yoga Pradipika as it is in your mother tongue, that is in Tamil. So that is the attempt which has been made. And not only that, the general purpose of think global and act local, that is served by, or I have attempted to serve that purpose through this translation. Along with that, in Shastras they say, Ukta, Anukta, Durukta, Chinta. How do we improve upon the existing knowledge? Only when we do Ukta, whatever has been stated but incompletely stated. Anukta means what has been totally omitted. And then Durukta, what has been wrongly interpreted. When these three dimensions of any existing knowledge is examined, and then some contribution is made in that direction, then the knowledge is furthered, and any useful contribution can be considered or kind of defined within this framework. To my limited capability, but with the great support of the traditional commentator Brahmananda Jyotsna for this Hatha Yoga Pradipika, I have addressed this Ukta, Anukta, Durukta dimension prevalent in the Hatha Yoga teaching learning practices as of now. I am just giving just one example for Durukta, how that problem has been addressed in this book. For example, if you just, one of the famous English dictionaries, if anyone is asked, they will say Monier-Williams is one of the popular dictionaries. So if you search for the word Hatha Yoga, the entry that you will get by Monier-Williams is that a kind of forced yoga or an abstract meditation forcing the mind to withdraw from external objects treated in the Hatha Pradipika. So he mentions Hatha Pradipika while defining the word Hatha Yoga Pradipika, Hatha Yoga by Swatmarama, and performed with much self-torture. So this is what Monier Williams has to say. It is performed with much self-torture, such as standing on one leg, holding up the arms, inhaling smoke with the head inverted, etc. This is what Monier Williams has to say. But unfortunately, most people, if they consult Monier Williams dictionary for meanings, but interestingly, Jason Birch, a contemporary researcher, he has corrected Monier Williams' view. He says Monier Williams confounded Hatha Yoga with various extreme practices of asceticism, tapas, that appear in Purana, but not at all in the corpus of Hatha texts. It doesn't mean that we have to go to Jason Birch. The West itself has corrected. It is for that purpose I am just quoting. But in our, this thing is, though there has been correction, self-correction in the West by the Western scholars themselves, but the damage has been done. In this very Pondicherry, I think a couple of years ago, there was a yoga seminar or conference. I was speaking about the textual ideas about yoga. There was another professor from Ayurveda. I was just out of curiosity, because I had this in my mind. I just asked him, which dictionary do you consult? He is a very famous Ayurveda professor known across the country. So he said, no, immediately he said Monier Williams. So that's the problem. The damage has been done. But in English, even if we try to undo, still people like these will consult Monier Williams only. Can we try this unexplored, unused space of Tamil language to bring in the wisdom that is there in our tradition? So here I have given in my, based on Jyotsna commentary, ha என்றால் சூரியன், இது பிராணனை குறிக்கிறது. உடலுக்கு சூரியனை போல் சக்தியை அளிக்கிறது. டா என்றால் சந்திரன், இது அபானனை குறிக்கிறது. உடலில் உள்ள கழிவுகளை வெளியேற்றுகிறது. யோகம் என்பது சேர்க்கை. இந்த நூலின் முதன் 3 உபதேசங்களில் கூறப்படும் ஆசனம், பிராணாயாமம், முத்ராக்கள் முதலிய பயிற்சிகளால், குறிப்பாக பிராணாயாமத்தால் பிராணாபான வாயுக்கள் ஒன்றிணைந்து முதுகுத்தண்டை ஒட்டி அமைந்துள்ள சுஷும்னா என்னும் நாடியில் பிரவேசித்தல் யோகம் எனப்படும். So you can see that there is no force or no turning upside down or not smoking in an inverted position, etc. So these are the advantages, or this is the effect, or this is the effort that has been put in. This is the background or an introduction to this book. This is a pilot work from my limited capacity to act local in the context of thinking global, and it can also be seen as a pilot work for other regional languages. They can also consider taking up, this is a literary fest, so I'm just saying that this is a pilot work based on my experience, so this can be taken up in other languages also, and mere translations will not do, workshops should also follow. Thank you very much. Now, I would request Sri Aravindan Neelakantanji to kindly release the book. I also invite Sri Jatayuji and Sampadananda Mishraji to receive the initial copies of the book. Please, sir. I request Aravindanji to please share a couple of words about the book.
Can you take 5 minutes? 2 minutes? Okay. Essentially, this I consider as a starting of a renaissance. See, when I was 7 years old, I was a sub-mediocre student. Only a sub-mediocre student would understand the fear of 2 marks. Between 3 out of 10 and 5 out of 10, your life and death would be hanging. So in such a circumstance, a 7-year-old child, where it would turn to? At that time, the grandmother or the mother in the family would intervene and tell, you study this particular stotra, you study this particular hymn, and that would give you this magical power to get those 2 marks. Okay. And that is how I learned this Vinayaka Raghaval. Vinayaka Raghaval was a wonderful, is a beautiful poem of devotion written towards Ganesha. And it contains these lines. மூலாதாரத்தை மூன்றல் கனலை காலால் எழுப்பும் கருத்தறிவித்து அமுத நிலையும் ஆதித்த இயக்கமும் குமுத சகாயன் குணத்தையும் கூறி இடைச்சக்கரத்தின் ஈரட்டு கனலை உரச்சக்கரத்தின் உறுப்பையும் காட்டி ஷண்முக தூலம் சதுர்முக சூக்கமும் எண்முகமாக இனிதன கருளி. This kind of knowledge, which is extremely deep yogic knowledge, is getting encoded into a hymn that a child learns. That is the kind of cultural milieu in which we are supposed to bring up our children. Unfortunately, starting from, let us say, 1970s or perhaps even before, this milieu has been getting endangered and it is almost now extinct. So, when somebody talks about yoga, naturally you only think in terms of Sanskrit terms, only you think in terms of Sanskrit books, and then you think that it doesn't belong to us. That is something, that is Aryan, that is Brahminical. So, this kind of a venomous mindset has been created. This book will bring back that particular golden period that we all enjoyed in our childhood, when we could actually relate to our culture. In that way, he is actually doing the work that already has been done by great masters like Avvaiyar and Tirumular. This is the starting point of it, and I am sure that the divine will help him to accomplish what Avvaiyar and Tirumular did for Tamil. Thank you. Namaste.